Can you tell us your name, when and where you were born, and your earliest memory?
Yes, my name is Joel Reinhardt Segraves. I was born in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, May 9th, 1943. The clearest memory I have, I remember when we got TV for the first time. And I waited and waited and waited for them to put up the antenna. And then when they got the antenna up, you only got two stations. And they were quite snowy, but I really look forward to that.
Can you tell us about the different places that you grew up?
I was born and raised in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, which is in sort of central Pennsylvania. I lived there until probably into my fifth grade year or so, and then I moved to Bradford, Pennsylvania, in the northwestern part of the state, just south of Buffalo, just inside the New York-Pennsylvania border. And that's where I went to high school, and that's where I graduated.
How about your mother and father? How did they meet?
As best I can understand, my mother and father met through a common acquaintance. And I know very little bit about that, except the town was about Phillipsburg, Pennsylvania, which was about 18 miles east of Clearfield. And that's all I know. There was some connection there, and that's the only thing I can tell you.
What were your parents like?
Well, Dad was one of these who, if he bought something very new, he had to find out how it worked. So the first thing he'd do is he'd take it apart. And that sort of rubbed off on me. My mother was one that was sort of very fashionable, had to have very nice dress, and she was very, proper and everything. And my dad was just easygoing, would do anything for anybody, was good-hearted, and a really good example for me.
Do you have any special memories of your parents?
One memory I do have was my father was seeking new employment, and we had gone to Baltimore, Maryland, and he was looking for a job with Westinghouse. And we had stayed in a hotel, and they at that time drank some. And I remember they purchased at a package store a bottle of liquor and wrapped it up in a paper bag, and were walking down the street. And I can still remember, I put on quite a show. I was so aggravated, and it was so embarrassing to me to see them walking down the street with that paper bag, which contained alcohol in it.
Can you tell us the names of your brothers and sisters and where you fit in that line?
I had no brothers and sisters. I desired to have one because I was growing up during the Korean War, and they would show you pictures of these babies that could be adopted, children that could be adopted, and I kept asking Mom and Dad to please let me have a brother or sister, but it never worked out that way.
What was it like living at that time in America?
It was to me, this community that I grew up in, Clearfield, Pennsylvania, was a population of about 8,000 people, small, sort of a rural Pennsylvania town. It was on the setting of the Susquehanna River. It was very quiet. I didn't live very far from our church and from our school. I remember my neighborhood, I enjoyed playing with the kids and everything. It was safe. You had no problems with crime, nothing like that. And it was just totally different from the way people live today. But it was very laid back, and none of the hustle and bustle that you find in the cities today.
What did you really enjoy doing as a kid?
Cowboys and Indians. That's something I really enjoyed. I still have memories of that, of trying to, it was like every day I wish I could reconstruct the same fun that we had in the previous day. And, but I enjoyed doing that, and I'd say, oh, if we could I had so much fun today, I just wish we could do it again the same way, but it didn't always work out that way.
Did you ever get in trouble for anything as a kid?
I did get into trouble a few times because I can't exactly remember what for, but to the extent that we lived in a multi-family house. And there was a back entrance to an upstairs apartment. And I remember several times hiding there uh, because my dad was on his way home. But I can't quite remember exactly what it was for, but I can see it right now. I can see sitting in that enclosed stairway at this moment. And I was scared for some reason. I think it had something to do with putting something on railroad tracks. As best I can understand is what it was, thinking I was going to get in a great deal of trouble. But I couldn't remember the specifics. I've longed to remember them, but I couldn't do it.
What did you want to be when you grew up, and why?
That's an interesting question because I always liked to work with my hands, and I watched linemen work on the poles. I remember going around collecting glass insulators that they used, or I'd collect things that telephone repairmen would use. And to me, that was quite the thing to be able to, I'd like to have had a set of climbers, I could climb the pole and to get up to where the footholds are, and then you could climb the pole the rest of the way. And that's the way it was.
Where did you go to high school, and did you enjoy it?
I went to high school in Bradford, Pennsylvania at St. Bernard's. It was a Catholic high school. In fact, it was one of K-12, actually a first grade through 12th grade. And I got there in what would have been the middle school years, and then I graduated from there in 1961. It was enjoyable. It's back in a time when I was really interested in Major League Baseball. And in the 1960 World Series, I remember we sat there and listened to the games on radio. And I remember hearing when Bill Mazeroski hit the winning home run against the New York Yankees. I remembered that. So I had enjoyable times. We had crazy things that happened. One day I came home. I'd gone to a basketball game one night and came back home after the game and everything. Next morning, we got up to go to church, and I walked outside. There was no car. And I had left the car at the school and rode home with someone else and had not noticed that I didn't have the vehicle. So I had some good experiences. Yes.
Did you go to college?
Yes, I went to St. Francis College in Loretto, Pennsylvania. That was in the central part of the state, near Johnstown and Altoona. In fact, it was located a little north of where Flight 93 went down. And when I was in college, I actually helped build part of Route 219 up through that area of Pennsylvania, as that was my summer job, working with a construction company. And graduated from there in 1965 with a BA in business administration.
Business administration. He's so sweet.
Yeah. I hope you can edit some of these things.
I think so.
Yeah, I think you will.
I think so. Keep going, or should we wait? Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. I wanted him to get out. Okay. Is there any other memory of your childhood that's important to you?
Well, one thing I remember growing up was, and I see a vision of that today, is that if you remember, I still believed in Santa Claus when I was young. And my parents decided that I apparently was not behaving well. And the old story that Santa Claus may not bring you toys, but he may bring you something else, like a piece of coal. Well, that happened. Several days before Christmas, Santa Claus appeared at the front door, dressed completely out, carrying coal for me to get my attention that my behavior had better improve before Christmas time came.
And did it improve?
Yes, I had a good Christmas.
It worked.
It worked.
That's it. That's the last one. Can you tell us your name, when and where you were born, and your earliest memory?
My name is Linda Darnell Whitfield. I was Segraves. I was born February the 16th, 1945 at Bruton, Alabama. My earliest memory that I have of childhood was the time we were in the car and I was playing with a little ring. I took the set out of the ring. I put the set up my nose, and then I told my parents. Of course, everybody was in a frantic. We rushed to the hospital. They looked and looked, could not find where I had put the set up my nose. However, when we came back out, they found it in the seat of the car. That is my earliest memories.
Oh, wow. How old were you when that happened? Do you remember?
Probably 4 or 5.
Wow. Okay, did you always live in Bruton, or did you live in other places also?
No, I only lived one place, and it was out in the country, a place called Whitfield Community. And it was almost exactly between Bruton, Alabama and Milton, Florida on Highway 87.
Can you tell us how your mother and father met and what they were like?
I can just tell you that as far as I know, they were just introduced by someone they knew. As far as what they were like, my father was very fiery as far as his comments he made, the way he talked to us. My mom was laid back. She was, well, to give an example, my father used to tell us, I'm the head of the house, but your mom is the neck that turns me. And that was about it.
Do you have any special memories of your parents?
Can we hold up real quick?
Yeah.
Let me get him the... Yeah. Hold up. We should be done in about...
Do you have any special memories of your parents?
Absolutely, I do. My father loved Christmas. Regardless of what was going on in the lives, I was the baby of the family. We always had great Christmas. As far as my mother, the memories of her I have are in the kitchen. She was always cooking. She was either cooking for our family or she was cooking for some other family in the neighborhood that had a need.
So you mentioned you were the baby of the family.
Mm-hmm.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I had an older brother and I have an older sister.
Okay. How did you get along with them? Any special memories there?
Well, there was about 10 years difference between my brother and I, and about 6 between my sister and I. And the only memories I have of them is when we would start arguing and bickering. And my mother refused. No child could fight in her house. So if we all got in an argument and started slapping around, she would come in with her belt and we all got it. And that was the way it was in the house. And that's the early memories of them and the fact that I was the baby. As the baby, they had to as I was the baby, they had to kind of do what I wanted to do. I was spoiled.
What was it like living at that time in America?
I believe that was a slow time for us. We did not have a television. We lived on the farm. We had a lot of farm animals, and it was a very relaxing time. Our playmates were mostly animals because we lived so far apart. And I think we learned a lot. We hung out a lot with our parents when they were in the garden or in the barn. And I think it was a great time to be a child.
What did you enjoy doing as a kid?
Probably reading. I always loved to read, but mainly playing outside with animals, climb trees. I had 2 younger cousins, and we did the boy things. Had a goat. We hooked up a goat to a cart. We did the things that you see in movies.
Do you ever remember getting in trouble for anything?
The only thing I ever got in trouble all my life is my mouth. I always did what I was told to do. However, I was very inquisitive. So when asked to do something, when I grew up in our household, you didn't question it. And if you did, you were talking back to your parents. So that was the only time I got in trouble. We had a peach tree outside the dining room window. And the joke around the community was the fact that that peach tree never produced peaches, because that was what my mother used for her switches. And they were for me.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
My earliest memory was I wanted to be a school teacher. Then I decided I wanted to be a nurse. And when we were teenagers, we took a nurse's aid course, what they called it back then. And I determined right then that I did not want to be a nurse.
Where did you go to high school, and did you enjoy it?
I went to Jay High School in Jay, Florida, and I loved it. The happiest time my teen years was high school.
Did you go to college?
I did.
And what did you study while you were there?
I went to Pensacola Junior College in Pensacola, and I studied business because I didn't know what I wanted to be.
Is there any other memory of your childhood that's important to you?
I think the memory I remember most of all is always having Mama home.
Yeah.
I remember coming in from school, even as a teenager. I would walk into the house, I would yell out, "Mama, I'm home." And if she didn't answer me, I would be so antsy. And I would go outside, I'd check the garden, I'd go everywhere. And it never dawned on me till years later how insecure that felt if I couldn't find her right then. She would always be home. And now, this day and age, I find it unusual that children don't have that luxury like we had.
That's it. We're good.
Very good. All right, you stay there.
Good?
Hey,
Okay.
Joel, can you clap? Are you rolling? Yeah. Clap for it. Okay, good.
Oh, I forget his name was Joel.
We got two claps.
I
It's
was
okay.
talking to you.
Yeah, you were looking at me. When
That's okay. Okay, are we ready?
Ready?
That's okay. When and how did you two meet?
We met February of 1966. We were introduced by a mutual friend.
Was it love at first sight?
No, it
No,
was not. It took a little while, but
Okay, let's start over.
Don't
When
keep
keep in
doing
mind that
but
someone might not
everything.
hear her answer her
Okay.
question, so you might have to say, no, it wasn't love at first
Yeah.
sight.
no. Okay, I
Oh,
got
yeah,
you.
that's good.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Want to start from the beginning? When?
That's
How
all-
did you two
that's
meet?
not- it's got to be a closed answer, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just say, was it love at first sight?
No, it was not love at first sight. It took a little bit. We dated for 6 months. By that time, there was love there. After that 6 months, yes.
What attracted the both of you to each other?
I think what attracted me to Joel was that he let me be myself. There was not anything I could do that he thought was silly, foolish. I was just myself.
From my point of view, I told her that I was attracted by her legs on the first date. And she said, "How could that be? I was wearing slacks."
I think he was just dying for an answer.
What was your first date like? Do you remember it?
I do. I don't know if he does. Our first date was in the afternoon. He came out to the country and picked me up, and we went into Pensacola. At that time, the only place to shop was downtown Pensacola. He had just gotten out of OCS. He said, "I need some clothes." All of mine are winter clothes. So we went to this men's store, and I helped him pick out clothes. And while I was doing so, he did not have very good taste. The guy who was waiting on us said, "You two must be married." And it was our first date.
And she still picks out my clothes.
Yes, I did.
I've been known to go to the store, spend 2 hours looking for clothing, bring it home. Everything goes back, and we're out of there in 15 minutes with her helping me with the right clothes.
How long was your courtship?
Our courtship lasted for 6 months. Pardon that. The interesting thing is how we got together. We both used the same cleaners. It was before Washington's birthday, 1966. And I went in there to take some clothes in, and the lady asked me, do I have a date? And I said, no, I don't have a date for the holiday, and I'm not much on. Thank you, Rusty.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Let me get back to where I was. And I said, I'm not
Okay.
much on blind dates. Could you tell me a little bit about her? And so I started to pry for information. And finally, I found out her dad was a Pentecostal holiness preacher. I was raised Catholic. That really went off well at the beginning. And secondly, found out where she worked. So this friend of mine had a 65 black Bonneville. So we drove through the drive-in window of the Santa Rosa State Bank in Milton, Florida, where she worked, twice in the wrong direction so that I could get a look at her. Later that evening I called. There was supposed to have been a formal introduction. And I thought by now it should have occurred. I called her up and started talking, just like I'd known her for years. And she says, who are you? And I explained that I was Joel Segraves, and I was told that I could call you for a date. Well, while we stayed on the phone for 2 hours that night, she had her father entertain a flight instructor from Whiting Field for those 2 hours while we stayed on the phone. And after that, there was no more flight instructor. Just, I was the only one.
Can you tell us about your wedding and what that was like?
My wedding was mostly planned by my sister, who I mentioned earlier is about 6 years older than I am. I was a person that just wanted a simple wedding, but not my sister. She wanted to make my wedding dress. She wanted to make all the attendants' dresses. She wanted everything done herself. And so I told her, sure, go ahead. She didn't have much time to do it, but she accomplished all of it. And she planned everything. I just showed up.
So where did you go on your honeymoon?
We did not have a honeymoon per se, because within a few days, we headed to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where my next duty assignment was. But we had an interesting wedding night. August, a lot of people along the beach. And I make no attempt to make any reservations. So we set off for Panama City. And we started stopping along the way, and there were no room in the inn. We ended up coming back to Pensacola and ended up in that stone motel with the separate buildings in Brownsville is where we ended up. That's where we spent our wedding night, in one of those little stone cottages.
They were very nice at the time.
They were very nice at the time. And then the next day, we were coming out of the restaurant used to be at the Howard Johnson's, and I met some of my friends. And I said, oh, I'd like to introduce you to my girlfriend. Oh, no, my wife, because we'd just come out together out of the hotel. And so that made for an interesting next day. So we never did have a honeymoon.
Even though about a year after that, we had the chance to go to Jamaica. He was on a cruise and he was coming into Jamaica, and I flew and met him for several days.
And that was a good honeymoon.
Yeah. Where did you live after your marriage?
Oh, this is a long story. We lived in Belmar, New Jersey, just across the Delaware River from Philadelphia. And we were in a downstairs below ground apartment. And that was our first place. So we could say we first lived in New Jersey.
What's been the biggest challenge that you have faced in your marriage?
The biggest challenge was the birth of our son. Sean was the second pregnancy. We had lost a child earlier. When Sean was born, there was no warning that there was a problem. You must remember this was back in 1969. Had a perfect pregnancy, but we got a shock when he was born. He was born with multiple birth defects. multiple birth defects to the point that he doesn't fit into a syndrome. He had so many of different things wrong with him. We were told he would only live maybe 24 hours. We were told to place him in a home, that if we did not, it would destroy our marriage. It would destroy his naval career. We listened to neither one. And I think it was because the way we were raised. I was taught whatever life dealt you, you took and you could do it. There's nothing that you would ever come up against you cannot handle. And years later, we were asked by a doctor, did we go for counseling? Did we sit down and discuss what our options were and what we were going to do with Sean? That was his name. And it just hit me. We never did either one. I didn't ask him, were we going to take him home? It was assumed he was going home with me. It didn't matter to me what else. And of course, it never crossed his mind to do otherwise. I think that was the biggest challenge for the first 34 years.
Specifically that evening when Sean was born, and I found out later when the pediatrician advised me that he had birth defects. And I remember coming back we lived in a mobile home at that time in Virginia. And I remember coming back saying, how am I going to handle letting Linda know that Sean has birth defects and that his success in life is, it may not happen. He may only live a short period of time. But I remember that it was taken care of by the time I had gotten there. The doctor had already gotten there first and had told her about it. So that took away the fear that I had and the anxiety that I had of trying to think of how I was going to tell her that Sean has problems. So that was a very, very difficult time for me of trying to let her know what happened.
What advice would you give to others to have a happy marriage?
I was something in there.
I was actually going to add something there too, but I was afraid to add to your list. Go ahead.
What would you say got you through that challenge? Can you go ahead and ask that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
What would you say got you through that challenge?
The main thing at that particular time was the love for each other. Also, our family, you have to remember, we were in the military. We were in Norfolk, Virginia. His parents were in Pennsylvania, mine were in Florida. So all we had was each other. Joel became my psychiatrist. I could say anything to him. Didn't matter. I knew I wouldn't be persecuted if I said I wished I could die from all this, anything, because I knew he wouldn't be horrified. He understood. Then later on, when our perseverance became weaker, we had to turn to God. That was the only thing that saved us from then on out.
And I'll add to that in the midst of all this, I was not born again, and neither was Linda. She grew up in church, but she sat on the pew. She was the president of...
Joel, I'm sorry. Can you, instead of say born again, can you say, I didn't know God?
Yeah. I didn't have a, okay. We ready?
Yeah.
I didn't have a personal relationship with him. I was raised in the church, but I didn't have that personal relationship. So while all of this was going on, her family was the one who was praying continually. And that's what carried us through. It was not on our doing, but it was the prayer of the family for us to get through what we were going through.
So what advice would you give others to have a happy marriage?
I'll start that off and she can finish it. Good communication. The communication lines have to be open, have to be willing. You can't hold things back. You have to say what you think, but in a loving way. And it's got to be worked out that way. If not, you hold it back. It grows seeds of anger within you. And you get angrier and angrier, and then things blow up and things won't work out. And then things really get bad and things escalate. And but if you're open and frank with each other and truthful with each other, that's the key, because I think that that lack of communication is what causes so many things in so many families, problems that they have.
The one thing I remember a priest told us when we were going from counseling was that if you'd always bear in mind, you do not ever go to sleep at night angry. Now, that doesn't mean you won't be awake all night, but the point is, put whatever it is that's come up during the day to bed at night. And another thing I have for couples who have children, regardless of whether you have money or not, take time for yourself. If you don't have money, get a babysitter, leave the children, go sit at the park for 4 hours, just the two of you. We were blessed in that we would go away for a weekend about every 3 months. But we never stopped doing that because we had to do that. It was too much trauma going on at our house. We had to have that time to each other to find each other again. And I do believe had we not done that, we would have grown further apart.
Can you tell us the names of the children that you've had? Who are your kids?
We had Sean, we had Tiffany, and now we have Leah.
And what was each child like?
Sean was our son with the multiple birth defects. We had a little girl named Tiffany. She had a personality a lot like Joel, I think. She was very laid back. She was very patient and very loving. And even though she was 16 months younger than her brother, she thought of him as a little baby, and she would play with him like that. As for Leah, we adopted and went to pick her up when she was 3 days old. We got her from Hammond, Louisiana. She is one of a kind. Even though she's adopted, most people don't believe that because she has a little bit of my personality as well as Joel's. But she has truly been a joy. We went into this adoption. It was a private adoption. But God knew our hearts. And I said, Lord, regardless of what happens when this baby's born, we're going to take this baby. But I said, I pray, because we don't know the history of the birth mother, that you give us one that we can have a normal child, so to speak, and that he did. She was everything we could ever wish for.
I'd like to just go back a moment to Tiffany. She was very determined. She was a reader. She loved to read. And we would say, okay, it's time to go to bed. Now, she had some mental development problems, but when we tell her to go to bed, she'd go in there, and all of a sudden, we'd hear movement. And one day we walked in there, and what she would do is she wanted to continue reading after the light went out, but there was a night light in the wall. So she would creep out of bed, go get her book, and go sit with her back against that wall with the night light, sitting there reading her book. So we'd have to go and put her back in the bed again. And who knows, probably was out there a second time, but she was very, very persistent child, yes.
What have you learned about parenting?
I've learned that the only way you can be successful is to be consistent. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. Just like a school teacher. If you tell a student that, yes, this is the consequence of your actions, and you don't follow through, means nothing. But consistency is the key. People say, well, I love my child. Well, the love really comes through is when you're patient and you're persistent and you're determined that you'll follow through, not take the easy way out. I remember especially with Leah, when she was growing up, she had one of these machines where you could play cassette tapes, and then you could match the letters up and it would talk back to you. And for some reason or other, she got sort of upset with it and threw all the tapes all over the floor. And I remember Linda spending about 2 hours with her until she picked up every one of the tapes. Now, typically the mother would say, well, I've had enough time with this and I'll pick it up myself. So the child doesn't learn a lesson. But if you do that and you're consistent in your approach, things will work out much better, and especially when you reach the teen years.
Linda, what about you?
One thing I do know about parenting, for those who do not believe in spanking, that is the worst thing possibly for you to not believe in spanking. I have never seen a child yet that at one time or another does not need one. There's an age when they're too young to talk to and explain, you cannot do this. You cannot run out in the middle of the road. That's when you start the spanking. I'm not talking about beating. I'm not talking about slapping. I'm talking about 3 good licks on the rear end. When little Johnny tears away from you and runs to that road, you will get him and you put 3 little whacks on his rear end. I promise you he won't do that again. I cannot believe people that I have met that say, I can't spank my child. And here you have a 5-year-old telling you to shut up. Never would have happened with my children. You have to teach them respect. And to give an example of this, because I know it works, Leah went away to college. She was told when she took the car that she could not come and go with a bunch of girls on the interstate at night. That was a no. It wasn't going to happen. We had some rules laid down. One Friday afternoon, she called me up and she says, Mom, me and 3 of the girls are coming home. And I said, really? She says, yeah, we'll probably be home 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, you're going to drive home now? She says, yes. And I said, Leah, what did we tell you about the rules about taking the car? I'm 18 years old. I can do whatever I want to do. I said, okay, y'all come ahead. However, you need to find some way to get back to college because the car won't be going. I said, that's all we need to talk about, right? She said, okay, we're on our way. About 3 or 4 hours later, she calls and I said, where are y'all? We decided not to come home. Now, this is an 18-year-old, but for 18 years, whatever I said or he said, we did. She knew as much as it hurt me that we would have to do that. The car with me going back. I had enough going on in our life, and so did he with Sean. At that time, we still had Sean. I didn't need this. And that's a fine example. I don't know how many other 18-year-olds would have just come home. And some parents would have said, oh, I wish you hadn't have done that. But I guess you're going to have the car. She knew that wasn't going to happen.
That's good. That's it. That's all the questions for this part.
I think we need to wrap up what happened to Sean and Tiffany, because I feel like
it's kind of left out in the air.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us?
How do you want me to?
Tell us what's the status of your children, or.
Well, let's see. When we asked them, how many children did you have, and tell us their names? Should we go back and redo that, and maybe, as you guys tell us the names of, the 3 children and their names, maybe kind of tack that onto and just do that question again, but add that wrap up to it.
Okay. How are you guys doing?
Is that okay?
We have 24 minutes.
24 minutes left? Okay. All right, let's go.
Yes? Okay. Okay, so you guys good with that?
Yeah, she's going to answer this one.
Okay. All right. How many children did you have, and can you tell us their names?
We had 3 children. The first one was Sean. The second was Tiffany. And then we adopted Leah. Do you want us to take it with this and tell something about it?
Yeah.
Say that again, and then just continue to briefly
on each one
of them, and then mention the passing away of the first 2. Okay. That way we can that way people know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how Leah's gone on, got married.
Okay. You want me to ask again?
Sure.
Okay. How many children did you have, and can you tell us their names?
We had 3 children. We had Sean, Tiffany, and Leah. Sean was the first. He was born with multiple birth defects. He lived to be 34 years old. He was very sick during the whole time of his life. He lived with us. He was an invalid. He was raised on baby food. We had to feed him. He couldn't walk. He had spinal bifida. Mentally, he was as if a 9-month-old, but he was very much a part of our life. At about 33 years old, he began to go into organ failure, and a little over a year later, he passed away. Tiffany was the second one. She was born crippled. She had ankles that went to the floor when she stood up. She wore braces. At 5 years old, we went to a missionary to hear her speak at Dothan, Alabama. Her ministry was healing. She prayed for Tiffany. She took off the braces. She took off the high-top shoes. She took off the socks, and our Tiffany walked for the first time ever without these. It was at that time that Joel met God. He really did.
She walked to me. And I tell people about this all the time, walked 15 or 20 feet directly to me. And prior to this time, with the braces and the shoes, she'd take about, well, without the braces with the braces and the shoes, she would normally only take about a step and a half and go to her knees. So with the braces off and the shoes off, she walked to me. And to me, that was a defining part in my life, because that's when I realized how much God loved me. Even though the sin that was in my life, how much he loved me as an individual. Cared enough for me that he would heal my daughter.
15 days later, she was struck with spinal meningitis, and she passed away within 24 hours, about 15 days after healing.
And Leah?
Leah, Sean was about 13 when we always had a caregiver. I worked. Work was my therapy. I worked. The caregiver told us about this young girl that was pregnant. She wasn't married. She didn't know whether she was going to keep her baby or not. So she had decided to think about it. A few weeks later, the caregiver of Sean came back and told us she's going to give the child up for adoption. We were in Louisiana. I worked with an attorney's wife, and she called her husband, and we found out what was the legal steps to take to adopt a child through a private adoption. He told us we could not be involved, but the caregiver could take his card to this young lady and she could come to his office. This was in October of '81. We waited and waited, and she never came. So February the 1st of '82, I got a phone call from this attorney, and he said, "Are you still interested in that baby?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Did she have a boy or girl?" He said, "She's here now with her parents. The baby's due any day, and she wants to give the baby up for adoption." So February the 13th, we had Leah. We picked her up on my birthday, which is the 16th of February. And she now is 28 years old. We were very blessed. We had so much fun with her all through her life. Challenges as well. She was what Dr. James Dobson would call a strong-willed child. We got through those years. She went away to college. She went to Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee. Very blessed. She was determined she was not going to stay in college forever. So sure enough, in 4 years, she was back home, graduated, only to get married a couple of weeks after.
And she's doing well.
She's doing well. She got married in 2004. Here it is 2010, and we're still not grandparents.
All we have is a grand cat.
Pewter.
Very good.
That's great. That's good.
There's one other thing in this segment we've done. You said that after your daughter was healed, 15 days later she got meningitis. I want you to talk about, I mean, God, why would you heal her? And then what's the deal? You know?
Do you want her to do you just want me to start talking? I think that the death of Tiffany was more dramatic to me than it even was to Joel. Even though I had been a Christian over a year and had made my commitment to Christ, I wasn't ready for this. I had too many questions. And I said, I don't understand. This is a miraculous healing. People in our church were totally flabbergasted. We hadn't, you didn't hear about healing anymore. This was a child everybody knew that she tried all she could to walk, and it wasn't possible. But all of a sudden, she's walking with no braces. Her orthopedist didn't know. He had no explanation. He put x-rays up against both from the time before, the time after. He said, I don't understand this. So I was just flabbergasted. I could not accept this, that we'd lost her. I didn't understand why. However, Joel, who had only been saved for like 2 weeks, was the stronger of the two. He said, we're not to question God. He has his reasons, he has his purpose. Well, that didn't help me a whole lot, but it took me longer to get over that and the whys than it did even Joel.
Glad we went back to that.
That's
a good story.
Golly. Oh.
All right. Last segment. You guys doing
Okay.
any water or anything?
No, we're
No.
fine.
Ready?
That
If
got
I get
another
up, I may
segment.
not come back.
Yeah, another segment. Huh?
One
Okay.
last segment.
That microphone went skippy for a second right at the end of that. I don't know.
Whose microphone? Her microphone?
X-rays. I can't tell if the mic did or if my headphones did, but
Okay.
so
Say that.
talk about the X-rays.
Okay, when we took Tiffany back to the orthopedist, even though it wasn't her time for an appointment, he took x-rays. He compared the x-rays. He took the day we went to the x-rays from about 3 months before, and he said, I can't understand this. I cannot explain this. We could, but it was hard for a doctor. He knew she had not had surgery. They were planning on surgery in a few months when her bones had gotten to where they wanted it. But he knew that this had to be something, as he said, supernatural.
Wow. That's incredible.
Let's take you.
Yeah, let's just keep continuing.
We're ready?
You roll.
Yes.
It's like millionaire.
Hey, deep breath, everybody.
Almost done.
Almost done. Okay.
Okay, ready?
Joel,
Ready.
please clap for us.
Good.
We're going to edit all those together.
Just random claps.
Hey, let me get a good one. Let me get a good one then.
I like it, killing a mosquito. Okay, ready? What kinds of work did each of you do?
Who?
Both of you.
I always was a banker. Always worked in a bank. When I was going to college, I worked part-time as a bank teller, and I got hooked. And I loved it. I loved the chaos, the tension, the stress, the chaos, everything. And I'm still working part-time.
I've tried to retire several times, but I spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy. Started as an aviator, a student aviator here in 1965 at NAS Softley Field. Moved over to NAS Whiting Field, which was during the time which I met Linda. I left aviation and ended up going aboard ship. And actually, as it ended up, I remained aboard ship for all the rest of my career, with the exception of times that I spent in shipyards. And I was an engineering duty officer, specializing in shipbuilding and ship repair. And I retired in Jacksonville in the end of 1965, and was pastoring a church at that time while I was still on active duty. Decided that I would come over here and go to Bible college to get a master's in theology, and her mother was not doing well at the time physically, so we decided to move back this way. In the interim, I spent some time doing substitute teaching while I was waiting to get started with Liberty College. And I was talked into getting my professional teaching certificate. So I went back to school, went back to PJC, University of West Florida, St. Leo's in Brooksville, Florida, and went ahead and finished all my education. And I taught math. I could teach math, science, and social studies. I spent 2 years teaching at Pace High School. There was they had to cut back some teachers. I didn't have tenure. So I ended up in the real estate business in Santa Rosa County, very active with the Santa Rosa County Board of Realtors as the secretary for like 8 years. And then I got involved again with the school district, working on Healthy Kids Insurance. This was insurance for uninsured kids. We were the 6th county in the state of Florida to have it. I would travel to all the schools in the county, make presentations, answer questions, work with having questions answered for the parents. In the process of that, I became involved with the Juvenile Justice Council, working with kids that were in trouble in the county. I eventually started a not-for-profit organization which ran the truancy program in Santa Rosa County for 5 years. We would pick up kids off the streets, call their parents, get them together to try to reduce the amount of time that kids are out of school. When I was operating on grants and when the money ran out and they kept changing, I ended up saying to the chief probation officer, "What do you have for a retired naval officer?" He said, "Well, you can become a juvenile probation officer." So that's what I did for 4.5 years and finally retired from the state of Florida. Now I'm back substitute teaching again.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite family stories?
There are many, many family stories. You're speaking mainly of the two of us as a family or any families?
Your family.
Is that what you're saying? Well, most of the stories that I can think about that concerns our family was when Leah was growing up. And Sean was at that time 14, 15, but you have to understand, he had a special chair and he didn't communicate with you. However, she thought he was like a playmate. So one day everything got very quiet. It was around Christmas. And I went looking for her. She was about 2 years old. When I walked into the great room, she had Sean pushed up into the Christmas tree. Now you got to remember, we had real Christmas trees. They weren't artificial. He was so jammed into the tree, he was just like sitting. And I said, "Oh, what's going on?" And she said, "He can see the tree." Well, I had to slowly pull him back. He had scratches everywhere and try to keep a straight face. Of course, he was so happy when I came to the rescue, but he loved her doing anything with him. Then around this same time, I went into his room. Everything was very quiet. He turned to look at me. He was laying in his bed, and at that time he opened his eyes and all this baby powder fell off him. She had powdered him all up. These were times that you had to be careful and not scold a child. She was doing what she had seen me do. And all I did was, "You can take a little powder off now," this sort of thing, because I could go on all day about that. But that was the fun time in the life for all of us, I think.
The other time that we had some fun was, we used to take Sean with us. He would go, if we decided to go midnight bowling, Sean went with us in his carryall. And he would travel around with us. And we had at that time an MGB GT. And it has it's a 2-seater with a flat cargo area in the back. And what we would do is set Sean up in his carry, had one of those big carryalls, and we would secure it back there, and he'd ride back there in the back. And we didn't have any seat belts for him or anything like that. We're driving along, and all of a sudden we look in the back, and there's no Sean. And we said, we quickly stopped the car. He had come out of his seat, and he was down, not saying one word. He was not really wedged. There was enough room for him, but where the seats ended and the platform started, there was a space for the adjustment of the seat. He fell into that space and never said one word. And here we thought we'd completely lost him altogether. He just disappeared from the car.
What was the best thing that ever happened to you?
Coming to know Christ as my Lord and Savior. And that to me was the total change in my life. And I don't know what else to say on that point of view.
Same thing here. That's where my strength comes from.
Right. What was the most difficult time?
Yeah, we did do that one.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah, I skipped the grandkids one because you already said you have no grandkids. You have a grand cat. Okay. Okay. What do you think your generation can teach the next?
Well, I can say what I have seen in this generation. I've seen a group of great, intelligent, fine individuals, young people, who are not committed to anything. In the 60s, we had a purpose. We were involved in politics. We were involved in what was going on in the world. In the decision made by the Supreme Court of Roe versus Wade, I was totally, and I still am, against abortion. And I'm gun-ho. I wear a pin. It's a pin of a little feet, of a little 10-week-old fetus. I've worn it since the 70s. I have a commitment. I will come up against anyone, any argument as to why a woman should have an abortion. There is no reason. Of all the education we have out there for the young people who tend to have babies and say, well, we didn't want them. Well, if you're going to go on that lifestyle, there are many ways to keep from having babies. There is no excuse. And that may sound kind of harsh, but there's no middle line, because this is not a perfect world. I've had people argue with me, what if this child 10 years old was raped? I'm sorry, this isn't a perfect world. And I'm not going to call judgment on anybody. But I don't see the commitment that young people have to causes that we had along our time. Learn your history in the country. Look around and see what's happening in our country. And so many young people don't know anything about history to know exactly what is happening today, even as we speak. And I'm so glad I sent our daughter to a school that taught American history. So that, if anything else, get involved in something. But I think we talking about have created a generation of, it's all about me. Well, it's not all about me. It's about your world. It's about what you live in. Take that cause, and any cause and go with it. Don't be ashamed of the gospel. Don't be ashamed to be a Christian. Stand up. Be Christ-like in your everyday walk. Whether it's school, whether it's your job place. That's what I'd love to pass on to them.
For me, it's one of having integrity, honesty, truthfulness. If there's anything I want to convey, is that I want people to see the Christ in me. I want people not to see me, but to see Him. And I pray all the time, Lord, let me please you in everything that I do. Everything that I do, everything that I say, that I'm pleasing you. And I want people to remember that I was honest, I was loving, I was kind to people, just like my dad was, where he would just, no selflessness, not selfish at all, but willing to give of yourself. And I think that's how I want people to remember me, that I was there when people needed me and I was willing to help them. She'd say if I got too loud, she'd go like this. And then she'd say, in other words, if I was not going back and forth, which I've trained myself to do, but if I do tend to get onto one side.
And this was to shut up.
Yeah, and then it was
You've
this.
been talking long
I
enough.
told some first graders that. I told them a story about that, and sooner or later, one of the kids went like this.
A first grader?
First grader, yeah, first grader.
That's great.
He loves to talk, and he was teaching one little preschool, and it was an art.
Yeah.
And he was talking and talking and talking to him. This girl says, "Mr. Segraves, we don't talk in art."
What the story was Dave's favorite cornucopia. And they were doing cornucopias that day in class. And I had to practice up listening to him. He helped me give me the history of the cornucopia because I had trouble even pronouncing it at first, okay?
It was
And I would
probably a
forget.
lie.
So what I would do is I had them in, they were doing cornucopia. So I was giving them
Okay,
the history behind the cornucopia. And that's when the
She
little
said,
girl
"We
just-
don't talk
and they
in
remembered
art
me. I was back in
class."
that class again, and one of the kids remembered that all happening from the previous year. The little girl just raised her hand and said, this is art class, you know.
We don't talk
We
in
don't
art
talk
class.
about
Talk
this.
here.
So that stopped the
Like-
whole history of the cornucopia.
That's great.
Out of the mouths of babes.
And Dave.
Okay. And Dave. The Mouse of Babes and Dave. Okay.
You clap for us.
What encourages you about the next generation?
I am encouraged about the next generation. They have so much if they would just take what they have and go with it. The era of electronics, to me, that's awesome. I don't understand most of it, but they're so smart that they pick up right off, and they would take that and use it objectively. I do have hope for them.
I would second that if they use those things for the right things, the right way, for betterment of themselves, they're very intelligent, very smart. There's no doubt about that. It's just focusing that in the right area.
What life lessons would you like to pass along to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren?
I think the one thing that I've heard all my life is character. Your word is your bond. I hope that when I have passed on, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren will, when they speak of me, that they will say, "I remember her. I remember whatever she said she did. I remember I could count on her. I remembered she was reliable." All the things that the morals and the principles that I stand for, that they will remember me for.
And for me, it's if you can't be successful unless you try something. This idea that you must try something, don't be fearful of failure. If you don't try anything, you'll never accomplish anything. And the idea that you can do it. There's certain things, if you have the right mind about it and determination, you can be successful. You can complete that. Not this idea, well, I can't do it. You know, it's too hard for me. To the point that people do not try. And my teaching always was to Leah, you can be anything you want to be. If you put your mind to it and it requires commitment and hard work, you can be successful.
What kind of legacy would you like to leave?
Basically what I just said, I would like to leave a legacy that they would remember me, just like when people bring up my father's name. I did not know about my father till after he passed away at age 74 of what he had done for the community. He didn't go around and show off. I didn't realize till at the wake, people would come up and say, "If your father hadn't paid off my farm, I wouldn't have any place to live." Or they'd come up and say, "I remember when I didn't have a car and I went to your daddy. He took me to the dealership and bought me a used car." I never knew any of these things. I do remember when my daddy worked at Whiting Field. And this is a funny story that you could always bring up. Back in those days, the sailors would, on Highway 87, have this little house. they didn't have cars, so they would hitchhike. Daddy would always pick them up. If they were going to Bruton, take them out to the house, and then they'd go on their way. As I got older, I realized during the night, these guys would come knocking on our door and ask my daddy, could you take us to Whiting because it's 2 o'clock and we can't walk, because they would be walking. And my daddy'd get up and take them to Whiting. And it finally dawned on me, how do these people know to stop at our house? We're out in the country. But somewhere or another, through word of mouth, they knew Mr. Whitfield's house, if you stop there and it's raining and it's cold, he'll bring you home. He'll bring you to the base. I learned so many things after the fact. I took it for granted that all people were like that, but I found out they weren't. But people would come to my dad and say, we need groceries. My dad did not give money out to people. That's one thing he taught me about giving. If you came to him and says, we don't have any groceries, he'd say, get in the car, let's go to town. He let them buy whatever they wanted. He paid for the groceries. If they couldn't pay their light bill, he'd say, bring me your bill. But I learned from him, you don't go around doling out money because you don't know. As he said, you're supposed to be accountable for your money. You're supposed to know. And I like when I go on to meet the Lord like he did, that people would stand at my wake and said, I remember when she did this. I remember when, and nobody knew it but the two of us. But I'd like to have that kind of heart, a giving heart.
And I echo that the giving heart, and that's what I've said all along, is that they see the Christ in me, and he gave to us, let me give to others without any selfishness.
Is there anything else you'd like to share or to add?
Do you?
I've said enough.
Okay, 2 last little questions.
Okay.
Okay. Why did you want to do this television program?
I wanted to do it in order to help other people
I wanted to
do this program.
be on this program.
Okay, I wanted to be on this program to show people in this day where half of the marriage is in divorce. It doesn't have to be that way. Just all this past few minutes that we've covered with you that will hold a marriage together. You can do it. You don't have to have your first argument and say, this is it, this is the end. I will say this one thing. My parents never argued in front of me, nor did his. They had their spats, but it was always, in those days, you took it away from the children. We were married about 3 months and we were in Philadelphia. And I don't know what it was about, but I am one that yells. And he started to walk off and he turned around and said, nobody has ever raised their voice to me, not even my parents. And I said, well, you better get used to it. So we had our big argument. However, after the argument, we said, what does this mean? Are we supposed to divorce? Honestly, been married 3 months. He said, I don't know. Our parents never acted like we just did. So it was, here we were, 21 and 23 years old. And that is a little naive. And I can remember calling my mom up and told her what just happened. She said, well, you know, what do you want me to do about it? I said, Mom, you never did that in a marriage. She said, oh, yes. All marriages are like that, but it's not the end. The main thing is to talk it out and get it over with. Get it out. You can't change each other. And I think that being in a program like this, I've heard people say, when we get married, things will be different. It's not. But you have to learn to adjust. You can improve. I'm very impatient. I can't change that in my makeup, but I have improved over the years.
I think I could put it in this phrase: what you see is what you get. When you go into the marriage arrangement, what you see is what you get. You're not going to change that individual. You've got to be compatible. You've got to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to give and take.
You have to love each other enough to do that. Love each other.
You have to be able to give and take. And I think, if anything that I can give through this, that you see, even in the midst of all the things that came against us, all the problems, is that we had to support each other. And life is not a bed of roses. This idea that we go through life with no difficulties, that's a fallacy. We're going to be faced with all sorts of things in our marriage, in our life, wherever we are, at work or wherever it is. We can't run from those things, but we've got to be determined that we're going to make it through it. And I think that if I can impart that to anyone, is that you're not going to have, everything's not going to be perfect, not going to be that bed of roses, not going to be that ideal marriage that you think that you see on TV and you say, oh, this is the way it ought to be. That's not the way life is. And it's something that it's a constant working. You have to work together to make the marriage work. And I think that young people need to see that, because so many times these marriages fail within the 7 years because they couldn't communicate. It wasn't what they expected. They expected to change the other person, found out that doesn't work. So it's what you see is what you're going to get, and you have to love them for who they are.
Very good.
That's good.
One final question, this is it. And what I'm looking for is like an endorsement of the program. Something that could be condensed into text, and that if somebody read it on the website, it's something to the effect of, I chose to be on this program because, we need to speak into the lives of the next generation, blah, 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 blah. This program is very important because blah, 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 blah. Can you give me a couple sentences of something like that?
Okay.
You do that one. You got that one too.
Well, you need to say something. Didn't I just say that, though? I chose to be in this program.
On this program.
Chose to be on this program in order to help the next generation understand what they can go through and what they can come through. Is that close enough?
Sort of. You can tell by his eyes, it just sort of.
Well, that's all I got. Take it or leave it. You tell him.
You try, Joel.
Yeah, after making those comments.
Here's what it is. You're talking to another couple in your age category who's thinking about being on the show, but
Okay.
hasn't really made up their mind.
Okay. That's good. All right. So why is it important?
I chose to be on this.
No, you tell him.
If somebody were,
No, just put this.
if somebody were thinking about being on the show but hadn't made up their mind, I would say.
Okay, if someone, you don't want me to say that, do you? Okay, if someone would love to be on this program, I strongly encourage you to do so, because we are the generation, the last generation, to give advice, to give help, to give encouragement to what's coming up.
I chose to be on this program, and if you are given the opportunity, after seeing this program, take the opportunity to tell others, because it will certainly be an encouragement to our younger generation. Is that a little better?
That's good. That's it.
Do you want to get them talking about pictures or home movies that they're giving you?
I was just
Okay.
put that down there so they would do that while we went in there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we can kind of get an idea.
Okay.
Well, I think we should give a hand to our moderator.
Yes. And our camera people.
And to Rusty for being so patient.
Rusty, you're so
Yes,
patient.
Rusty, so patient.
Go play in the street.
You're a shot guest.
Get up.
So yeah, good job, everyone. I think the only thing that's left to do is Joe and Paze. I'd like to get some shots of them. Maybe standing on the front
Holding
porch.
hands.
Rusty.
Making out.
Yeah.
We could stand and block the door so we wouldn't see it. Rusty will be up here too. He can be like part of the family. Just don't
put on.
Just don't let Leah see this though. See?
Don't be looking at her. Look
Which way do you want us to look?
away.
Okay. And smile at Ian. Look at that smile. Smile at him.
Why?
Look at him. Hold your
Why would I
stomach in,
smile at
Mom.
you? Oh, on the stomach in, I'll pass out.
Look that way. Look that way.
I'll
Look
pass
that
out.
way.
Ah.
You want to smooch me on the cheek?
Leah would die.
Oh, if Leah was here, she'd be just, she'd.
Okay.
You got that one too? You got this one?
With our bellies. With the dog.
Are you?
So they walk towards you. I'd like to have you guys maybe just start over here, walk hand in hand.
Walking, we're just walking through the breeze, walking through the town. What do you want to talk about?
I don't know.
Don't be
I don't
stiff.
know. Don't be so stiff. No, don't be so stiff.
To the
Are we going
mailbox.
out to dinner tonight? Is
I
that with
guess so,
Dave
with the
and
children.
with the children? Yes, we are. Yeah, it's his birthday, isn't it? Yes, it is. And the mic's on. Did you know that?
I don't
Yes,
care.
yes, yes. It is.
Shut up.
You guys all fucked out.
Just about.
He's still taping. Look at that. Look at that. He's still doing
Don't
things.
pay him any attention. We
Okay.
don't want anything posed.
Oh,
Remember,
okay.
Leah always didn't
Yeah.
want us to pose.
Yeah.
She
Or
wants to keep
scripted.
talking.
Nothing was scripted either.
Really?
Yeah, you could tell by my responses.
I
It
know.
was not scripted. Yeah. Hey, Rusty.
Interesting.
New member of the family, along with Pewter and Snuggles
Should've
and
brought
Stacy.
Peter up here.
I don't know where he is.
Yeah.
Our grandson
people
has
here,
run
you won't-
away.
He won't be around.
Yeah, he's bashful.
He's not used to people. It's the breed too.
Yeah, that needs to be taken care of.
Come on, Daddy. Done do.
Tell me where you
Walk
want to
around
go.
the dog.
This is where we want to set up that our Christmas and
Yeah.
all that. Got to get this
Let's go to the
got to get this
mailbox
cleaned out.
around here.
We're going to go out and check our mail here. Let's go out there.
Yep.
Oh, just a minute. You want to get the mail?
Certainly.
Yes, we always come and get the mail together every single day. What do you think, Rusty?
Rusty's happy.
Rusty is happy.
He likes
So
a lot of attention.
He does. That he does.
He's a real people person. Just has to be around people.
What are we going to do with this tree?
I don't know.
Come with me.
Come over here and check it out.
See, this needs to be broken off.
Well, that can be cut down. I can cut that one. Just leave that center one?
Yep.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that. That'll work. I can cut it because it's down at the base down there. So
How about you, Rusty?
we won't have much of a tree left, though.
I don't care. You don't want that all going up.
Yeah, your hair is blowing all around.
Have we done enough? Well,
Have we walked enough?